This episode is proudly sponsored by Morpheus Publishing, helping people with lived experience turn their stories into powerful published books that inspire, educate, and create change.
Visit www.morpheuspublishing.com.au for more information.
Welcome back to the Lipedema Podcast. We're your hosts, Shell
And Tiana, and today we have a very special guest who's looking super fun and vibrant over there on the side. It's the Mojo Mentor, Loz Antonenko. Loz, thank you so much for joining us today.
All right, Loz, we have met before. You are a powerhouse of a woman. I was blown away when I saw you speaking at an event, and you're fairly new to this space with lipedema. So how did this all happen?
Yeah, it's an interesting journey, as it normally is with lipedema and other sorts of inflammatory things that we go through as women. But I'd always had issues with my legs for a really long time, not realizing that, maybe this is a thing. I remember as a teenager, I was always teased for having a big bum. I always sort of carried my weight in my lower body. And I had what I just assumed was cellulite as a young female. But growing up and doing bodybuilding shows, getting quite lean, I then realized that my legs kind of didn't match the rest of my body. And the pain that I thought every person had in their legs apparently wasn't normal. I remember even as a teenager, like I would bruise so quickly. I feel like I just wake up with bruises on my legs. And it's interesting because ever since I started menstruating at like 13, my menstrual cycle has been completely out of whack. And hormonally, it's been a little bit of a, can I say a swear word?
Yep.
A shit show. That's not a very bad swear word. And now in my early 40s, I've sort of realized that probably for the majority of my life, I've had some sort of underlying inflammatory thing going on in my body that has now become quite obviously lipedema. And having that formally diagnosed, as it normally is with most people, is kind of a relief because you're like, oh my God, I haven't been imagining all of these things.
Validating.
Yeah, it's very, very validating. So yeah, it's been an interesting part of my recent journey, but I think honestly it's been going on for some time. I think that now I have a way of identifying what it is and actually labeling it in a way that's not victimizing myself or going, oh, well, that's the reason for all of these things and I excuse myself. But I think it's more for me, I guess, as a neurodivergent health, fitness and wellbeing expert to then unpack that and go, okay, well, like if someone like me is going through something like this, how can I better then support the people that I'm supporting with a little bit more knowledge and understanding of what this actually means?
Yeah, and it means so much more when someone is walking in the trenches with you. Like reading from a textbook and trying to figure things out with you. Like, it means so much more.
Agreed. And it's, it's inflammatory, right? And we understand that we don't understand a lot about lipedema at all. And I think that the experts out there are still trying to work it out, but, we're all sort of living with it and managing it and learning as we go. We're building the plan while we fly it to sort of develop inflammatory management strategies.
Yeah, we're actually the experts.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. And so can you talk us through how you came to be diagnosed? Like what that was like?
Yeah. So in 2018, so as a consequence of lots of things in my life, I decided to embark on the most logical thing to deal with grief and things, which was to do bodybuilding shows, which is just stupid. Really?
That's such a Loz thing to do.
So, I know.
A neurodivergent thing to do.
Right. And to make that even more neurodivergent, to put it into perspective, most people do one show every 3 to 4 years. Well, I did 13 shows in 14 months. And right, overachiever. But it's interesting because for the first time in my life, I got really, really lean and all of those issues and hang-ups I'd had kind of disappeared, but my legs still didn't feel right. Because I got so lean, I ended up developing, well, I already had it, but a varicose vein in my left calf. And it was very, very painful. And that is what prompted me to go start this journey, right? So for complete reasons of vanity, I went and saw somebody who was specializing in phlebology, but he had emerging interests in lipedema treatment and he was going to Germany and learning a very specific technique on managing that. And I remember having a conversation with him in 2018 because he looked at my legs and he was like, there's some interesting things going on. I don't think he was really in a position to diagnose at that stage, but I got my varicose vein treated with sclerotherapy and some laser and, did the thing, did my shows, 13 shows, 14 months, gave myself an eating disorder. That's another story. But metabolically, I think I did something very, very significant to my body through that process. So coming out of that, it took probably, if I'm really being honest, about 3 years to get back to being able to have a healthy relationship with eating. I developed a disorder called orthorexia, which is, clean eating, really it's an eating disorder, masters clean eating, basically. And I really didn't know how to integrate back into society. But as soon as I started learning to develop better habits and understandings with food, it was then that I started to notice that this thing was happening in my body because I was developing actually more awareness within my body, not just pushing through. And that's when I noticed, like, at a myofascial level, like I was getting all of this pain in my legs, and it was knees up plus calves. As I've gotten older, I found that, my training style changed. I educated myself, became a coach, became an expert in nutrition and exercise and all of the wonderful epigenetic things that we can do to help manage inflammation. Yet I still was getting this pain. I went and saw once again, for vanity reasons, a specialized integrated. He is a doctor, but he specializes more in aesthetics. So he does a lot of things like fat cavitation and HIFU on the body. And he treated me, he was a friend, he treated me for, I would say, 6 months. And he just said, I've never ever met somebody like you who's so lean and so fit and so strong, and you've just not responded at all to this. Have you heard of lipedema? And I'm like, what is that? Somebody mentioned that to me a few years ago, but I don't really know what it is. It was in passing. And he said, I really think you should go and see somebody because you've got all this fibrotic tissue. And he explained the difference between cellulite and lipedema. He was very good. He was from South America. And in that country, when you do your doctor's stuff, you are a very integrated doctor. You have to learn all these extra things, which they don't do in Australia. So anyway, that then prompted me to then go back to the guy that did my first lot of sclerotherapy. And by that stage, he was trained in lipedema, and he is the one that gave me a formal diagnosis. I then went back to my GP and ended up, just because I always like to get a second opinion, I ended up getting a referral to an occupational therapist who specialized in lipedema, and I was told she was an absolute gun. Went and saw her, and she said it was refreshing. Her words were, it was refreshing to see that somebody was trying really hard, and she doesn't often get people like me who are doing so many positive things. But the words were, it must be so frustrating for you when you do all of these inputs, yet you don't get the outcome that other people get. And it must be even worse when you're a coach and all your clients get the results and then you aren't. And it was like that bittersweet moment where I was like, oh, this is actually a thing now that I have to manage. And so from there on in, I'm currently wearing some compression garments, actually. I had more sclerotherapy a week ago. That's my third treatment to help manage the vascular aspect of it. But, it's an ongoing battle, to say the least, just to try and manage the pain and the symptoms and the inflammation, and then all of the other things that sit beneath that within your body.
And also the mental load.
100%. I mean, the mental load, I guess I'm just used to having mental loads throughout my life. It's just another thing.
But it's been handed some shit over the years.
Yeah, but having that formal diagnosis, I'm looking at potential surgical interventions, but I'm not sure if it's the right time in my life. And I'm not sure if it's the right time in human history because they just don't know enough about lipedema when we're talking about these experts. And yet there's still no real recognition medically that it is a condition, and therefore there's no sort of subsidy for surgical intervention. So I'm kind of in two minds about where to go at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, and probably one that I haven't thought of. Like, you're so right. There's no real consensus across the world. So
No.
there's people that have expertise of experience from dealing with us as,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's hard.
Mm.
Yeah. Can I ask that because you have been very, very lean doing bodybuilding, and you have not, and then you've had periods where you don't concentrate on that aesthetic, like being so lean. Can I ask, your symptoms of lipedema, the pain and the inflammation, was there elements of resolved when you were so lean, or did the pain persist, or what was the difference in your experience with lipedema throughout that journey?
Yeah, the pain, it has maintained its size and shape, basically. You know what I mean? Like when I was very, very lean, although you couldn't really see it, from a distance, that there were like lumpy nodules throughout my legs. It was because I was basically an athlete and I was training at that level. I was doing a lot of recovery. When I was foam rolling, which I was encouraged to do before every training session with my coach, it was basically unbearable. And I had no idea that that was just not normal. I just thought everyone who foam rolled, it was like, this is fucked. Like, why would anybody want to actually do this?
It's excruciating.
Yeah, it is excruciating. It was excruciating. And I would like sit on certain spots and just wince in pain and like breathe and breathe and breathe through it. And so, in terms of pain, that pain hasn't changed. In fact, I would say the pain has lessened only because I'm so used to it now. I foam roll pretty much every day still. It does help beneath that fascial area for muscles, for recovery. And I find that if I can just push through that threshold, I'm very cautious about certain times of the month when my inflammation is higher. I have other conditions. I have a condition called ulcerative colitis. I have ankylosing spondylitis. I'm like a medical textbook, man. Like I walk around with these medical acronyms after my name. It's insane. But, I realize that for the benefit of those other conditions, foam rolling and recovery and that myofascial release structure and all of the things that I do are there when I need them. But I'm also not obsessed going, oh my God, I must foam roll. And like, if it's definitely not appropriate, I won't do it. But the pain is somewhat lessened only because I think that I have better strategies now around, and I also have a better association and a better understanding of what my limitations are with pain. And now the fact that it is actually pain that I'm experiencing. It's just not the normal thing that everybody experiences. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
absolutely.
like the validation that it's pain for a certain thing makes you a bit more tolerable of it.
Yeah, to some degree. I mean, there are certainly times, like right now I've just had sclerotherapy and I've got to wear these bloody compression garments for 2 weeks. And, I'm not going to foam roll my legs because that would be stupid because I've just had stuff in my veins. But I'll do my lower back, I'll do my hips, anywhere above where I've been treated. But then, I use things like I have my pneumatic compression boots that I use once or twice a day. I use Comfy Wave, which are like a woven organic textured compression garment. So I'll use those underneath the pneumatic compression device and I'll sleep in those until I pull them off in the night going, fuck this shit, because it's uncomfortable. And then all of the other little things that I do for pain management. But yeah, it hasn't really made a difference whether or not I was lean I'm still quite lean. Prior to that though, prior to those bodybuilding shows, I wasn't lean. I was a whole butt cheek wider. Yeah. That's my unit of measure. A butt cheek. A butt cheek.
It's an official unit of measure now.
Yeah. It can be. It's like a F load.
Yeah, I'll allow it. Yeah.
Well,
an F load and a butt cheek.
What's bigger, a shit ton or a fuck load?
Yeah, I think a fuck load. I think a fuck load is bigger than a shit ton. I feel like when I visualize that, I think a fuckload is probably at least 3 times bigger than a shit ton. And my butt width is probably in the middle of both of those.
You didn't know you were tuning into a mathematical education.
Yeah, the maths isn't mathing though. It's some weird girl maths that we've got going on.
System.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Loz. So we're going to get away from that now and go more into your coaching and your expertise.
Yes.
So what are the biggest myths you want to bust about lipedema, exercise, and weight loss?
Here's the thing about lipedema. It is an inflammatory condition, right? And so when we go and stick ourselves inside the mainstream medical model who don't really understand the nature of our condition to begin with, we find that we are put in very risk-averse situations, which is like, you must stop doing things. Okay. And in my opinion, in my experience, having multiple inflammatory conditions, whenever I see a doctor, specialist, expert, first thing they says is like, you're doing too much. And so my concern and challenge with that, having just said what I just said, in terms of being lean, being fit, not being fit, being like, I couldn't walk for 10 months of 2020 due to developing ankylosing spondylitis, right? I will tell you that during that 10 months, it was the most mental fuckery and physical pain I have ever been in my entire life. And without being able to exercise the way that I exercise now, all of my lipedemic related pain actually got a hell of a lot worse by, I would say, a fuckload.
Yeah.
That metric. So, right. So when it comes to exercise and lipedema, it's about finding the thing that works. People say, what's the best type of exercise? Well, I'm going to say the one that you want to do. Just let's be honest.
Yeah.
I think that when it comes to exercise, it's understanding what your body likes. It's also understanding what your body needs. And because lipedema affects predominantly female populations, right, our bodies have different needs to male bodies, typically. When it comes to exercise, there are many benefits that benefit the body through exercise, specifically moving lymph, which we know the lymphatic system, it doesn't have a pump, it doesn't use a heart. We have to use manual pumping through exercise, through movement, right? But exercise doesn't have to be thrashing yourself. And I learned that the hard way. Like, exercise doesn't have to be thrashing yourself to the point of complete exhaustion. Exercise, it should refuel you enough for the next session. And so you should get tired, you should get sore, but you should not experience pain. Pain and discomfort are two separate things. So it's taking yourself to a point of discomfort, because we actually need discomfort for our body to adapt, but then allowing ourselves to recover. And so when I talk about exercise, specifically with people who have lymphatic concerns or issues with lipedema, it's about finding that level of tolerance and starting at a very low level and building ourselves up rather than going gung-ho and then working ourselves back, if that makes sense. So it's doing the minimal viable amount of exercise and then diversifying what it is that we do. So especially as women, we've got to consider our bone density. And if we do have hormonal dysregulation, which is generally associated with conditions like lipedema, then we've got to understand that we are at a very high risk of losing a lot of bone density, especially as we get older. And we know lipedema predominantly affects older women. Do you know what I mean? Like, so there are a lot of things that go into this. Generally, strength training is a form of exercise that most women don't like to do. They kind of try and do everything other than that. They'll like get drumsticks and beat like Swiss balls and do like bouncy yoga and really obscure shit that you see on Instagram reels, right? But one of the best things that I have found that work for women who have lipedema is strength training, and a combination of strength training with flexibility. I always incorporate Pilates. I do have a vested interest in that because I am a Pilates instructor, but everything I teach has come from me having to learn it myself. And I'll tell you what, at 41 years old, I've actually never been so fit, so strong, so healthy, and so physically and mentally resilient as a consequence of being diagnosed with lipedema and then having to do something about it. And it doesn't mean that I don't have days when it's really, really shit, but it also means that I normally have days that aren't really, really shit. And I know that my bone strength has increased through menopause. We lose about 4 to 6% of our bone density every single year. And straight after the age of 30, we're already losing 2%. Men only lose 1%. So beyond the skin and beyond the layers of fascia and the fat and all of the things that sit above the bones, there are beneath that a lot of benefits structurally to our bodies that are going to help us have more physical resilience as we start to age.
I love that, Loz, and I do empathize with you, and it's at a different level. I've not dealt with the comorbidities and the other inflammatory diseases that you have, but if I don't exercise, I am in quite a lot of pain.
Right.
I love exercise, and in fact, since I had when my girls were 5 or 6, I moved from like that HIIT training and doing everything but strength training to doing strength training. Now, different to you, when I say strength training, I have 24 kilo adjustable dumbbells in my house. I can acknowledge that that's not sufficient for heavy workload of like deadlifts and stuff like that. but it's a safe way of doing strength training in my house when I'm not going to the gym.
100%.
And you'll do
100%.
it. And I will do it. I
Right.
wake up in the morning, I roll out of bed and I do it. And I can't tell you how much stronger and fitter I feel just doing strength training 3 times a week than I ever have doing all of that HIIT stuff that I don't. Not to say that it doesn't have a place.
Yeah.
Percent. But you hit the nail on the head there, right, T? You said, I do it. And so the first rule of Fight Club, the first rule of exercise is do the thing that you're going to do. I mean, first and foremost, the most perfectly programmed workout routine in the world literally falls apart if someone can't adhere to it. The same goes for nutrition, right? You know, people follow these obscure diets because they've got a diagnosis of an inflammatory condition. I'm like, you hate your life. Like, you are crying into a chia pudding. Like, you know what I mean? Like, please stop. Like, I think also there's that fine line too. And I guess social media and a lot of this stuff that we're saturated in on a daily basis by our own accord encourages us to go to these extreme lengths in order to find this optimization and this performance. And look, I'm all for that, right? And I do coach people specifically in that region if it's warranted. But the general consensus is if it's easy and accessible and you're going to do it, then that's the thing to start with. And sure, you know, you said, you know, maybe it's not quite good enough weight to hit these strength things, but there's no reason why at some point you can't then add to your collection of things in your house and then make some investments in some things that are going to stimulate. And for you, it'll be osteogenesis, which is that bone regeneration.
Which they say needs to be done by impact. Well, I'm not going to do impact training because I tell you now, when I do HIIT, I get very sore and very
yes, no, and that's you're right.
Very.
Actually, I would say that that's not true. Having worked with a company that have an entire gym system designed for enhancing your skeleton and growing your skeleton, it's less about impact and it's more about load and it's more about metrics of force and multiples of force based on your body weight to stimulate that bone growth in certain areas of your body. So I think it's like 11.2 times your body weight of force needs to be applied to your hip joint in order to stimulate osteogenesis. Now, that's who the hell can lift 11.2 times their body weight. But in terms of volume, if we can hit that over time with repetitions and sets and weight, then all of those things multiplied together will give us the volume to then stimulate osteogenesis. And I know even in my mum, who also has lipedema, you know, she had been told she was osteopenic and just working with me and lifting heavy. And she's in her 60s now. She's 65. You know, we've increased her bone density by 11% in her spine.
So cool.
So good.
You know, and she was told that it was impossible. And this is what I mean about the medical system, that it locks you into this idea and this mindset and belief system that you must be risk averse, you must have avoidance in order to not injure yourself. But you've said, you know, when I don't train, I get sore. But then if I do too much high intensity interval training, I also am ruined and wrecked to the point of like, why am I even doing this? And so once again, it's finding that diverse spectrum of movement patterns that are both functional and foundational in helping us age better, because we're all aging, right? I mean, we are. And the reality is that lipedema is a progressive type of disease, which then, if we're not mindful of what we are doing, can accelerate in its progression. So it's not about being perfect. It's about just finding the things that we can do, starting with that, feeling good and allowing that to give us some momentum to then make some other positive changes in our life. And it doesn't have to be hard. As you said, you just got 24 kilo weights there at your house and then you do it. I mean, that's not, it's the motivation to do it the first 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. And then that then carries through and then it becomes a habit.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. Now, very fitting to what we were just talking about, but I wanted this part to be super practical. So if someone has lipedema and feels overwhelmed, perhaps they've been doing some extreme versions of things to try and, you know, regulate this condition. What are the first 3 habits, just 3, you would start with immediately?
I would say to implement what I call, firstly, movement snacks, which is not taking the full course of movement, not, you know, necessarily committing to, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to do 45, 30 minutes of exercise. Having movement snacks. So being aware of something is the first part of changing it. If we are now aware that, you know what, exercise probably will help me, then we can create movement stacks throughout our day. So something like what I'm doing now, you'll see that I'm walking on a treadmill. I have a walking pad under my desk. We know that the lymphatic system needs manual movement. So increasing your steps per day and getting up and standing up a little bit more is going to help. Find ways to move. I've got friends who are lymphatic experts and they do all sorts of things, rubbing boobs, you know, doing the light bulb dance. You know, it's all of those things. So first of all, find a way to implement some movement snacks into your day. And I would say most hours of the day, find an opportunity to get up for just a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thing number 2 is to be really conscious of recovery and really conscious of things that trigger more inflammation in your body. Most people are not in tune with their body, and their threshold of unacceptability is very, very great, which means that things can slide and slide and slide and they don't notice and they don't care. And all of a sudden it gets to this threshold point where they're like, fuck, I've got to go do something about it. And it's been so far gone that it takes so much to try and step back and find yourself back to where you were. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we want to reduce the threshold of unacceptability in our life so that we become quite sensitive to change. And some of the best ways to do that are through practices of mindfulness, things like meditation. And I'm not saying that you need to be sitting atop the lofty peak in the middle of spring in a lotus position, you know, with a freaking eagle soaring over your head while you reach a state of nirvana. That is not meditation. What I'm saying is starting to understand and be really present in the moment and inside your body. So being aware of things like your heart rate, your respiratory rate, any sort of physical sensations. I have a whole checklist, which is a checklist of physiological signs of stress in your body. Things like, are my eyes darting around? Is my mouth really dry? Have I got tunnel vision? Have I like switched out of like sound and I'm not really engaged with my environment? And because when we can start to train ourselves to be more mindful, it actually allows us to then notice things inside our body. And that was one of the first practices that I did when I went down this rabbit hole, as I learned how to become mindful as someone who has ADD since 1998. Before it was cool, before anyone was talking about it, I was diagnosed, right? And it's funny because I've never really been able to switch off my brain majority of my life, but I have this ability now to really tune in and I can tell you when something's out. If my wee changes color or smell, or if, you know, I start to notice that my pain is increased, or I've got lumpy bits in my legs, or I've got glands that are up, or my hair has changed, or my skin has changed, you know, my breath has changed, my body odor has changed, my hunger signals have changed. Like I could tell you immediately when something's not right. Right. And so that takes practice, but that's the second thing, right? You've got to learn to be more mindful because that's going to give you more presence in general. And that's going to allow you to notice things in your body. And the third thing is a dietary intervention conversation. Majority of women in Australia and in Western cultures follow what I call the standard Australian diet. And it's very similar to the standard American diet. And if we abbreviate that, it abbreviates to SAD, which spells the word sad. And it's predominantly very low calories, very high carbs, and very low fat with not enough protein. And from a metabolic, I don't even know what that word was, a metabolic optimization perspective, we basically need to switch that around. And my role as a nutrition coach, you know, which is a really big part of what I do as a Mojo Mentor, is really rewire women's perception of what they need in their body to help their body just run at a baseline minimum level of good health, right? I'm not talking about optimal health. And, you know, having a better relationship and understanding and educating ourselves around food. There's a lot of noise around food right now and what I call greenwashing and the health halo effect. I see ads on TV. I don't watch a lot of TV. And then I see ads and it's like putting protein in Milo cereal. I'm like, why the fuck is there Milo cereal? First thing, why would you add, you're eating that for energy. Why do you need to put protein in it? But all these things have popped up where everyone's on this bandwagon of protein to the point where it's actually become ridiculous. And I think it's not about being perfect with how we eat, but just getting some basic education around what are my minimum calories that my body needs. It's my BMR. What's my basal metabolic rate? If I'm eating below that, my body is constantly starving. If I'm eating at that level and I'm exercising because I'm trying to like improve my body, am I still actually under fueling myself because I'm not taking into consideration all that extra stuff I'm doing? I'm a busy mom. I've got all these things going on. And then within that structure, am I even hitting close to the protein that I need? Am I getting the fiber I need, the phytonutrients I need? And so it's not a lot of education, but there seems to be this massive overhaul in the health industry, which is all quick fixes, pills, surgery, where people still don't even understand how a lot of that stuff works. And they start to get these temporary transient results of, say, weight loss, especially women, not realizing that that weight loss hasn't discriminated across where in their body they've lost weight. Not only are you losing body fat, but you're probably losing bone, which you needed to preserve, and you're probably losing any remnants of muscle that you might have had. And then you've got water fluctuations on top of that, which are normally a consequence of hormonal cycles. So, there's a lot that goes into it, but they would be my three things, which is understanding the movement snack situation, understanding and tuning into your body and being a little bit more aware and in tune with what's happening, and learning and educating yourself around what your body needs. And if you're following a diet that has a title, you probably shouldn't be on it.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
it. And I was going to summarize for you, but you've done it so beautifully. I love that. Thank you. We're just going to go the next level deeper now in terms of a practical way of going things. If somebody is experiencing a flare in their symptoms, like a flare in inflammation, what can they do to keep momentum with all of those habits that you help them put in place without pushing through pain or discomfort or, things that aren't serving them?
Well, we know that stress increases inflammation in the body, right? We know that stress is a primary driver of inflammation. And so when we are in a state of flare, the first and foremost thing we need to do is identify has there been a trigger that's caused this flare? Or is it, in my situation, normally something that I can't identify? Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Has there been a trigger? Was it something I ate? Was it something I did? Was it something I thought? Was it a reaction that I had to something? Was it a hormonal part of my menstrual cycle or a hormonal thing that's now driven this level of inflammation that has now put me into a state of just acute crises, right? So first and foremost, identifying what that thing is, because that's going to give you a little bit more clarity. And if you can't identify it, it is okay, because it could be multiple things happening all at once. The second thing is to take the time to rest. And I'm not talking about sitting on your ass with your legs up, binge eating and, a packet of Tim Tams and watching maths.
Damn it, Loz.
I know. Whatever the hell
Why'd
was
you
on.
pull me out like that?
I've been watching. But, so there's a difference between self-soothing and self-care. And I think that people go, self-care, I need to go get a massage and do a facial and put on those little pads under my eyes that I got off Chimu or whatever. No, we need to then do things that are actually going to be good for us. So eating something that's really nourishing for us that might be very simple. So things like bone broths are a really good thing to calm your digestive system down, very nutritionally rich and dense. Things like going on walks, getting out in nature, getting some sunlight, doing things that are lightly stimulating but also recovery. And so this is where having those tools, if you do have the ability to have some external tools, things like a vibration plate at a low speed, things like for some people, they like doing rebounding. It depends. I wouldn't be doing heaps of rebounding if you're in a bad state, but things like those compression garments, using those tools that you have, having things like a lymphatic massage, things that are going to help just move things through your body without causing too much stress, because exercise is a deliberate form of stress on the body. We have to remember that. And the third thing is, once we've worked out, if we can, what the trigger is, we've done some recovery, is to then ride the cycle out, because the reality is it's not going to be permanent. And start planning to do things when you're not in that acute state. I think that we can get really fixated, having been down that path so many times in my life, get really fixated in that pain state. And it's a really big world of pain that we're in. And it's the mental anguish that we're in, because we go, why is this happening to me? This is fucked. This is not fair. Why am I having a flare up? And then we start sort of victimizing ourselves with these close-ended questions that aren't really productive. And so I think about, the quality of your life is dictated by the quality of your questions. So in those moments, it's a really great opportunity to explore other ways of asking questions. what can I do? What do I want to do when I'm out of this state? And if we can then move ourselves to a space and a time horizon that's beyond this current moment, it then enables us to look forward to something and then plan to do those things. Because the reality is we're going to have a flare up. We're going to have a chronic moment of, it's part of the journey that we're all on. Right. And, this is the weight that we're carrying. It just happens to be visible, to some people. Some people are carrying other things, trauma, but you get to choose how heavy the thing's going to be. So, in those moments, use them as opportunities to leverage yourself to a version of your reality that sits beyond the acute moment. And then you can get on and do things. And so by the time that thing passes and you've managed it, then we move through. And so I guess that's not really practical in terms of like, you've got to do this kind of exercise and you need to eat this and you need to eat this. You need to focus on those things. I call them handbrake habits. So there's 5 of them. It's your eating, your breathing, your sleep, your movement, and hydration. And if you just can focus on those things on a daily level, rather than acting like handbrakes on your life, which when we are in an acute crisis, these become big handbrakes. We just want to start working out which handbrake can I unlock. Maybe I got to unlock that one first, because then that one will unlock, then that one will unlock, and then these 2 will unlock. And it's focusing on one of those 5 things, which we have to do anyway in our life, and just work out, can I just make this thing a little bit less shit today? Did I, because I'm in such a world of pain, did I just forget to drink water? Did I self-medicate with 2 bottles of wine? And a bunch of stimulus that I didn't need, like caffeine and stuff? Or could I focus on getting myself just a little bit more water today so I hit that baseline level, my 2.2 liters a day if you're a woman, or 2 liters if you're a man? Did I just try and live on 4 hours of sleep and imagination and hope to get through my day? Can I find a way to increase my capacity to sleep a little bit better? Do I even know when I'm sleeping? Can I measure that? And so by putting a little bit more focus around those 5 things, I guarantee that majority of the time your flares won't be as bad. And if they are bad, you'll find a way to then move through them with a little bit more presence and probably a little bit more speed than if you didn't have notice to those 5 things in the first place.
Yeah, I love that. It definitely was practical.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. To our last question, Loz.
Wowee.
I know, right?
Going quick.
All right. So how do you talk about food changes without triggering diet culture or perfectionism? Because I'd say most of the lipedema community has had a shit time of yo-yo dieting, of self-blame, of being caught up in diet culture. And I know I've just come out of a terrible spiral over the last few weeks. How do you make those changes without triggering any of that?
Food. I'm very particular about how I have conversations with food, because I think most people think that they have to be on a meal plan or a diet, as I alluded to before. Like, I've tried this, I've tried that. Food structurally is a necessity. Otherwise, through evolution, we would have just stopped eating, and we would have been able to just have shakes. You know what I mean?
Shame that we can't.
I know, right?
In a world where we just get pills.
Have a pill and a shake and we're done, and eject the nutrients. But the reality is that food should be enjoyable, and culturally and historically, food is there to be shared. It's there to nurture us and to give us the energy and the sustenance we need to do our life. And so when we start putting really heavy restrictions around food, especially from the perspective of calories, we then start to impart on our lives and our friends and our community this sense of, everything has to be very rigid. But if we can learn to become flexible without understanding food. So the first part about food is you need to educate yourself about what actually food is. To even understand what a calorie is, I can literally explain this to people. I'm like, do you understand what a calorie is? And I explain about how it's a unit of measure, and they use a thing called a bomb calorimeter, which is a closed circuit. I'm like, your body isn't a fucking closed circuit. Why? So, no, right. And so you're not an app and you're not a spreadsheet. What you are is a human being, not a human doing. And so when we can understand that calories are important to some degree, but what's more important is what we actually eat. And so day in, day out, I'm having conversations with people, and they're getting these supplements from the shop that have this fancy packaging and these bright colored things. And it's like weight loss, fat burning, all of these things. And then I turn it over and it's got like 50 ingredients, 40 of them you can't say. Something like that is not a really great start to learn how to eat healthy. So the first thing I'm going to say is educate yourself and understand what food is, what it's made up of: carbs, fats, proteins, which are macronutrients, and vitamins and minerals, which are micronutrients. Within understanding what food looks like, we then need to work out, okay, on a daily basis, how many grams of protein should I approximately be having? I'm not saying getting really specific here. I'm saying understanding how much is actually in your food, because when you understand that, and I have a thing called the fuck-free flexi framework that I've created, right? And it educates people. It uses visual diagrams. It's like, on a plate, this is kind of what your plate should look like, right? There's different stages that you work through, and it's about learning to prioritize education and then teaching people how, over a period of time, when they start feeling better and they're looking the way that they are wanting to look from the inside out in terms of their identity, they're becoming the person that they want to become. I'm not talking about, oh my God, I get to hit an aesthetic. They're now feeling like the person, because you lose yourself, right?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
And you lose control, and you
Correct.
know that you lose control.
Correct. And then it's bringing them to a point where they're doing all of those things and they're able to understand how to sort of regulate their food. Okay. It's a very, very easy system to follow because it doesn't give hard and fast it gives pragmatic strategies, but not hard and fast rules about how to eat. So if you are in a state of struggle, my first conversation with you is like, go and educate yourself around what foods are actually protein. Like, what is protein? What is fat? What is carbs? Eat the things that you enjoy and feel good about those, but also make sure that you can educate yourself about how much of those things you actually need. Protein is very, very important as women, helps us grow muscle and helps us with our metabolism. But if you are just fixating on calories, you are losing the point. When I first work with people, they go, how many calories am I supposed to have? And I say, I'm not going to tell you. You don't need to know. It's not important. It's irrelevant. All I need you to do is focus on making your plate look like this for the next 4 weeks. If you can do that for 4 weeks, 80% of the time, try and make your plate look like that. I guarantee you will improve. Your mojo will improve by like 60%. And when I say mojo, your sleep is going to improve. Your energy is going to improve. Your lymphatic health is going to improve. Your motivation to want to continue will improve because you'll start seeing and feeling different. Okay. You're going to feel more wholesome and more like yourself. And then in 4 weeks' time, we'll slightly shift your plate a little bit and we'll tweak it and we'll teach you how and why that is the case. But, if we're constantly eating things out of packages, it can become very challenging to understand what's real and what's not in our lives. So go whole foods most of the time. Prioritize protein and fiber, fill in the rest with whatever feels good. And as long as you're feeling comfortable and satisfied with what you're eating, you find that most of those triggers won't even exist anymore because you're actually just going to feel good and you're not going to have all of those really restrictive principles in your life ruling every single thing that you eat.
Yeah, I love that. But what if you start struggling? Like, what if those... I'm talking for myself now. I want to...
Okay, you're just like, I'm literally just asking for a friend, but I mean myself.
Hypothetically, if someone was to...
What if, like, you start going down that rabbit hole? Like, I know it's all fueled by wanting to shrink ourselves and all of this shit that we've been told our entire lives. What's the best way to bring yourself back? Would that be like the 5 handbrake that you were talking about before? Like, just switch to that?
Yep.
Yeah,
So
okay.
the thing is, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And I'm not talking about weighing your food. What I'm talking about is the intangible stuff, right, that we seem to not measure in our lives. It's putting measurements in place. So when we wake up, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do we feel when we wake up? If 10 is, oh my God, I'm on fire, and 1 is, I feel totally shithouse, fuck you. And then there's somewhere in between. If we can then rate ourselves, and so this is where we need to become quite subjective and marry subjectivity with objectivity, right? So if you are really, really stuck because you've gone on this roller coaster of emotions and you've sort of found yourself at the bottom of the roller coaster hanging upside down by your feet, and then your tits are hanging out because your top's come up and you got blood rushing to your head. I don't know where that scenario just came from.
Sounds good.
Also, I'm thinking like Lethal Weapon 2022, So anyway, so if that's where you're finding yourself, then we need to pull ourselves back to those basics. So start with the basics. And so I say simplify to amplify rather than overcomplicating things and trying to overhaul everything. Bring yourself back to those basics. So how is my sleep? You may need to start measuring your sleep. And I know that sounds really weird, but in terms of where we are in human evolution, like we have so many tools to measure our sleep. We've got little mats that we can slip under our bed. We can use things like Oura rings. That if you can start to measure your sleep in terms of how long you sleep for, the depth and the architecture of your sleep, it's going to then help you to work out if it's improved. You're also subjectively going to know it's improved because you'll wake up and you'll be like, I don't feel so shit. Instead of feeling like a 2, I feel like a 3 out of 10. And so bring yourself back to that. Water, checking how much water you've been drinking. If you're drinking under what I told you, 2.2, and you're only drinking like 500 mils, it's then using that as a focal point rather than going, I'm going to invest in diet culture. I'm going to bring myself back to just getting a little bit more water every day. Looking at your movement. Have I got up and moved most hours with a little movement, snacky, mix, snacky? What does that look like? Not overhauling, going, oh my God, I'm going to do a 12-week challenge.
Yeah.
Okay. It's removing that all or nothing mindset with your food. Can I find ways to just eat a little bit more fiber today? Can I find ways to get that little bit of extra protein today? Because instead of the 100 grams of protein that I probably should be hitting for my age and my weight and my height, I actually only ate 20. How can I eat 30 today? Can I eat 30 grams of protein? It's not about, oh my God, I'm going to hit 100. You'll get constipated if you do that. And then looking at things like breathing. Can I find mindful moments in my life and that mindfulness piece that we spoke about? One time a day. Because you know what? I never do it. So then tomorrow and the next day and the next day, I'm going to put in my phone a little reminder to just switch off for 2 minutes. I'm going to do a little breathing exercise for 2 minutes. It's 120 seconds. And then, when you're feeling comfortable doing that, you'll naturally decide that you want to keep doing it. So it is really bringing yourself back to those 5 handbrakes and slowly releasing them, because I guarantee you, if you are really, really stuck, probably the first thing that you're thinking of is, how can I completely overhaul myself? And so those thoughts are futile because generally they result in failure, because to go from, 0 to hero, it's such a big step. We want to just get ourselves, instead of going from stuck to unstoppable, let's just get ourselves unstuck. Let's just focus on that part first, because once you get there, you're going to feel a hell of a lot better than you do when you're completely stuck.
Yeah. I love that.
Thank
Thank you, Loz.
Anytime.
Awesome.
Yay. This was such a pleasure to talk to you. So vivacious, and it really just comes through the computer screen. And I bet all of our listeners are going to feel that as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We will have all of your details on our podcast. What is it called?
In the show notes.
Thank you. In the show notes.
Share notes.
And hopefully we will catch up with you another time.
You know where to find me.
Yeah.
We'll hunt you down.
Thanks so much, ladies. It's been an honor and a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Lipedema and its symptoms vary from individual to individual. The opinions and advice voiced in this podcast are of a personal nature and used for educational purposes.
Please take away from this podcast what resonates with you, and please see your GP or preferred specialist for diagnosis and healthcare. We are Shelley and Tiana from the Lipedema Podcast. Until our next episode, bye for now.